So here's a little challenge I've come up with, and my first challenge was Sean McGrath. So I'm calling this the top 6 challenge. It's so hard, and it's even hard to narrow it down for us, I think,
Oh, yeah.
to just 6 models, especially just 6 engines. But the top 6 challenge is basically what are your 6 favorite models. Why not top 5? Well, because I was a fan of Pokemon when I was younger, so 6 is all you could have. So I've kind of stuck with that, as weird as it sounds. So, Sean, top 6 challenge. What are your 6 favorite models and why?
So my first number in the top 6 is an Atlas GP40 here. This is 2024 Milwaukee Road GP40. This is the Atlas Silver Series or whatever. But reason why it made it on my top 6 is that this is probably one of the best weathering jobs I've done on a GP40 ever. I really got into the nitty-gritty with this one. I faded it really nicely. And what's nice about Atlas models as well is that I can take off the whole long hood and the cab and the short hood and just have the sub base, like the walkways and the battery boxes separate, which makes it really easy to add grease and stuff to the bottom of locker doors, which is why I like this model so much. And that's why. It runs really nicely with the Little Joe as well, and pretty much whenever I run them, they're always together. So that's the first one.
So what I'm going to do is we're going to have a little bit of fun with this. So as he goes through and tells me or us why these are his favorites, I'm going to go through and review it myself. So there's actually not a whole lot to criticize on these because they are amazing models. First, I would point out my 2, maybe 3 favorite things about this. One, the painted horns. Do you mind if I move this around?
Yeah. No problem.
So the painted horns right here. That on any model to me sets it off. And Milwaukee Road seems like on a lot of their horns has that red inside there.
Yeah, it was primarily the GP40s and the SD10s that actually got red insides of their horns. And that's something that whenever modelers see that on my models, like, oh, you even got the horns right.
I think that's really cool. It sets off every Milwaukee Road model I see it with it. It's just an extra little bit of detail that, like I said, just sets it off, stands out from the rest. And you don't see it on everything either. The next is just going to be the beacon. I love beacons, okay? I like flashing things, bright, shiny, and that's cool. And the beacon's clean, so they're trying to keep something on this engine clean. Not the rest of it, but the beacon.
Yeah, just the beacon.
And then I just got to say, like, the level of detail with the weathering. Like, if you turn it around this side, this is the side I've been seeing. Like, the Herald is kind of clean, but you can see the dust and everything that's been kicked up on here. And then the faded Milwaukee Road lettering. I mean, it's just awesome. I mean, the white on the handrails pops. I mean, the steps and all the holes and all the see-through parts just pop. I mean, it's just amazing. The level, like all the grime, like that was an engine that got just used. I mean, for everything from road service and switching to working in the yards. I mean, these engines got beat, and this model really reflects that. It's an awesome job.
And it's a decent model as well. There's a few things I actually modified as well, and it really is a top-notch model. That's something you would almost expect from a Genesis quality.
Oh, yeah. Atlas makes good stuff, and you've done some really nice touches to that, so just add to it.
Yeah. So my next one is my father and I, we both co-own this Overland Brass Milwaukee Road Little Joe. The cool thing is that Milwaukee Road had electrified and dieselized power in the Bitterroot Mountains in Montana, Idaho, and Washington. And this was one of his models that I kind of adapted as well. Recently, I've added DCC into it, and it runs at train shows with me quite often. And, what's there not to love about a Little Joe? These things are... And it's Overland as well. You can't get any better than that. Just the amount of detail that's on this model, it'll knock your socks off. You could look through this whole model the whole time. There's still things I'm noticing. Like, it even has the all the little step lights as well underneath the chassis. You can look at it. It's almost like a Rapido model. It looks better when it's tipped over on the side of the tracks.
It'll be fun when I get my Little Joe up here. We can put them head to head and kind of compare the details. I have an MTH plastic, or actually cast Little Joe. And I've got the freight and passenger. So I've got the passenger. That's one of my top 6. And we'll put them head to head and kind of compare some of the details and stuff. Because this is actually an old model, isn't it?
It's a pretty old model. I think it was produced in the 80s. And You know, for being a model produced in the 80s, it doesn't run terribly either. Although it can't pull for it. That's why it's always coupled with the GB40. It can't pull anything that I put it in front of.
So I'm going to go over this a little bit real quick. I can see this has got tons of detail. I mean, I can look at the top, especially right up here by all the electrics, that this has got far more detail than my MTH. I mean, there's some stuff that stands out that, yes, mine has too, like the wipers, and then the holes, or the lines right here, the pantographs. But this has just got so much more intricate wire and just detail on here. Like my hatch on mine is removable so you can get to the switches underneath to control the pantograph power and directional pantograph operation, everything. Because the pantographs on mine are fully operational and you can operate it either manually or automatically depending on how you want to use it. But this obviously isn't going to pop off real easy.
Nope. It's all soldered together, I think.
But I mean, it's amazing. I think the hand grabs and stuff, like the grab irons and stuff, might be a little bit thicker, but it might just be the paint that I'm noticing that's a big difference.
Mind you, I didn't paint this one. This was actually painted by my father. It's actually something, I'm going to critique it a bit. I don't like the orange on it. I think the orange is wrong. And coming from a guy who is prototype driven, this orange is wrong. And I've told him we should strip it, and he's like, no, leave it.
So I'm not going to argue, because any father that does hard work, I'm not going to argue with him. He can have it his way. But I'm sorry, Mr. McGrath. I got to point out, there's some brass showing on this cab window here. Just saying. Maybe not strip it. Just add a little bit to it. But overall, it's a very nice model. I will point out, however, that the back windows on here, the other cab, is actually plated over. Something that MTH models didn't come with, but I know some people added. And it's just an extra touch. And we could probably go into hours of talking about the little Joes and everything Milwaukee Road did wrong. And what they had to do to modify these to actually get to work well on the Milwaukee Road. They turned up the voltage, they poured, I thought they poured concrete or something on the top, and then actually welded slab steel to the inner walls to add weight.
I wouldn't know. I don't know too much in depth about the Joes, but really the blanking out of the rear cab, that was something that the Milwaukee Road did. After a few years, they didn't like the double cab feature. The only models that actually kept the double cabs were the passenger models. So that's where MTH, they kind of get a pass in that as well.
Yeah, and they're so cool. Milwaukee Road only had a handful, and they had a chance at so many more, but they were sold to Chicago South Shore. They had two, the 800 motors, I believe they were called.
Yep.
And then to a Brazilian railroad, I think.
That's correct. So the Milwaukee Road owned 12 Little Joes, and there were actually 20 produced in the original set. So Milwaukee Road, they were actually approached by GE to purchase them, and they actually would have gotten a pretty good deal. For about $1 million, they could have bought 20 Little Joes plus all the extra parts. Well, the Milwaukee Road wasn't too sure if they wanted to keep the electrics at the time, so they said, maybe. And, well, they didn't. They missed out on a great chance. A bunch of other railroads got in on it, and when the Milwaukee Road realized, hey, we need new electrics, they came back to GE like, hey, can we get some of those Little Joes? They're like, oh, yeah, you can have them, but we're still going to sell you for $1 million, but there's only 12 of them left, and there's no extra parts left, so this is what you get.
Yeah, and they really made Milwaukee Road in my mind. If you've studied the electrics and Lines West and everything, which is a great book by, I believe, Noel T. Hawley, there's a ton of information, and Pentrax has done a great 3-part DVD or VHS video on it, and I could watch that all day. They go over so many details about these engines, and it's just so cool. They had a unique horn, and then just to see these run with Jeeps and SD40-2s and SD45s, and all the stuff that they ran with was just so cool. You never knew what you were going to see with a Joe, but if they weren't running in pairs, they had a handful of diesels behind them.
Yep, that's classic Milwaukee.
So I'll let you move that guy over. I'm not touching that guy.
All right, so the next one I have is my Scale Trains SD40-2 with DCC and sound, the rivet counter model. I really like this model. It's a pretty decent, it's a really nice running model. It can pretty much pull any train I put it behind as well. Heck, I didn't even need to put a second model behind it. It could probably pull a 50-car train, no sweat. I've weathered it a bit. The only thing I'm sure Sean's going to point out, I had to take off the dynamic brake fan for the time being. It popped off when we brought it out, and I wasn't going to put it back in. I'll glue it on. I'll glue it on when I get home. But, it's a really nice model. This is the definitive model for the SD40, I really think.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to run and grab something really quick. Where did I put
Looking for the 3000 one.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. So, and I'm just pointing this out because I love the SD4-2, and Scale Trains did an amazing job. I actually had 3 of these from Athearn Ready to Roll Sound, and I bought one from Scale Trains, and I'm like, this is the way to go, okay? And we're not getting paid by Scale Trains, trust me.
I wish, though. Scale Trains sponsors,
Hey,
please.
yes, or him, both of us.
SDL39. SDL39.
We'll help you. So with this guy, I bought this from Spring Creek Models a couple years ago at Train Fest. It was the last Milwaukee Road SD4-2 available at the time. And I was just like, finally, I have one. And I was so just excited about it until I got it home. And I might have to put a video of this up later. Scale Trains did such an amazing job on this model. They went out of their way and they programmed the correct e-bell, electronic bell for this model. And Scale Trains, I love you. I do. I love your dealie. I have a bunch of your models. They're great, second to none. But you didn't allow me to change the bell on this model like you do every other engine. I hate it. I can't stand the bell on this thing. I literally tried to pawn this off on him.
I can confess this bell is horrendous. I didn't like the bell either. Typically, I'm all down for Scale Trains, but this bell, it's a clincher, man.
It's the first time I heard it was like, oh no! It sounds like a toy. It sounds like one of those toy crossing gate.
Yeah, something on your desk or something like that. It's a no-go.
It is the correct bell. It just isn't my taste. So, but anyways, getting back to his engine here, Scale Trains is right out of the box awesome. I mean, the level of detail is unheard of. Some people look at it as that's more to break off, which I can attest to. I have the bicentennial unit, and while trying to change out the couplers, I tried to remove the rear pocket, and the paint must have been wet or something, or it just got stuck, and there was some damage that ensued. But, I mean, this is a beautiful model. I mean, you can just look all around, and there's detail everywhere. I mean,
yep.
And you could weather these basically however you want, and there's no wrong way to do it. Just some light dust, or grime it up. Just make it nasty, because these things would work everywhere. With shorter fuel tanks and stuff, they could go over some of the lighter track.
Yeah.
But they had the horsepower and the tractive effort to work in the mountains, which they often did.
And that's another great thing that Scale Trains did. They correctly did everything. Actually, this is like I said before, this is the definitive model of the SD40. And Scale Trains has gotten things right that other manufacturers before have kind of neglected. Mainly so, the front handrails and front and rear handrails on SD40s, and for Scale Trains more so, they actually have the correct handrail, which is actually one full piece instead of having a safety chain. Every Milwaukee Road SD40, basically every Milwaukee Road engine had a full handrail. It didn't have a safety chain. Milwaukee Road and Sioux Line, for that matter, didn't have safety chains in their locomotives.
Like the Athearn you have over there.
Yeah, so it still has a safety chain. But Scale Trains really nailed this model. I can't even tell you. I am so happy with this model. And all the lighting and the sounds are so amazing. I mean, the class lights, that's something that I really liked about it as well. I can change the class lights, all the colors as well.
Yeah, that was one thing that blew me away with my first Scale Trains purchase, which was actually a C39-A. I bought it because it was such a unique model, and especially when I got my SD40-2, aside from the bell, that was so cool that you can change the classification lights. You can have it white, you can have red, you can have green, or just off. It adds a touch, and you can add that into your operations and your layout. If it's a mainline freight, or if it's a way freight, or whatever, change it up and run different things. It'd be hard to hold any other manufacturer next to Scale Trains that makes an SD40-2. I know Intermountain does an excellent job, Athearn does an excellent job, but I don't think it'd be fair to compare Athearn Ready to Rolls against this, just because they're two different price points, they're two different models.
And even for that matter as well, just to add in, even when I detail an SD40, it still doesn't compare to a Scale Trains SD40. And not to knock my own work, but my ready to run models don't even look as great as the Scale Trains SD40 rip counter.
Yeah, there's just more stuff you can do from the factory. that you can prepare for than you can aftermarket, even with all the detail parts available in 3D printing and whatnot. So that's an amazing engine. But let's move on to this beautiful SD10 here.
So this next model, this is my first SD10, the first SD10 ever produced with the 3D printed parts. You know, I've weathered it, I've painted it correctly and everything. You know, it's not a terrible model. It's got all the correct lighting features that an SD10 would have. Things I don't really like about this model, even though it's still made on the top 10 list, there's still some downsides. The Pro 2000s, the clips that hold the shell down to the chassis, they're known to break off. I used to have to go back and make new ones because the shell doesn't stay on. It doesn't sit correctly in some spots, so I had to replace that. But otherwise, this is my first SD10 I made, and it's got a really homestay in the fleet as well.
So, now that I have something to compare this to, when he first said, "Oh, yours is way better than mine," blah, 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 I was just like, well, why would you make mine better than yours? But I can see, as, you know, being the first one, yeah, there's some, you know, some spaces and some gaps and stuff. But overall, it's an amazing model. And for this to be anyone's first is still impressive. I mean, you've got all the lights, the horn, the beacon, the filters, the weathering. And the weathering is probably one of my favorite parts after the fact that this is just a custom engine. And not a common one at that. Probably the coolest thing, and I even told him this a few minutes ago, was the air tanks on the bottom. Anytime you're looking at locomotives and you see that huge gap and you see Milwaukee Road and you see those air tanks, you could probably just say, oh, wow, that's an SD10. It just stands out. It is so cool. And that, and then the number boards. I think that it's cool. It adds kind of like a streamlined or more muscular look to it, I think. And it's just sharp. It's just overall sharp. And I think this is a great engine. I think you should go and make yourself another one with everything you've learned.
Yeah.
And maybe like the last one that you ever make, and just go all out, and then just see if you can impress yourself.
By the way, all the SD10s I'm making are going to one-up this SD10 in so many different ways. I can't even begin to explain how many ways that the new SD10s are going to one-up this locomotive. I mean, trust me, you're going to get a lot for your money.
And if you're interested, comment down below. And if you guys want us to do a thorough review of his work on those two engines, we're happy to do that next time he's back in town. Because he is a full-time college student.
Yep, UW Platteville, class of 2023, studying mechanical engineering and a minor in German.
Thinks it's 2023. Wait till he gets busy with this stuff. So, no, let's go on to the next model here. You said you love F units. Let's see this one.
So this F unit is a Intermountain Kato kit bash kind of deal. So this is an Intermountain shell on a Kato chassis. So the Kato chassis gives me a better running, but Intermountain shell is a pretty good cost for a model, and it has all the detail I need. So we bought this model at the Mad City Train Show last year, and I went to town on it. I super detailed this one to the limit, and you can tell because I've added the correct horn. I've added all the grab irons that that Milwaukee Road F units had. It's got the toasters. It's got the oil cooling coil on the roof, MU cables, and prototype weathering as well. This model, even fun fact, actually went to Europe and England for model shows. I still compete actively, and they didn't really have much of it. They didn't really like American models, and that was kind of the sucky part. I didn't place very well, but in the United States, I actually do pretty decent with this F unit. The weathering on this is probably my favorite F unit I've ever weathered as well. Just the weathering, all the panel lines and everything are intricately weathered as well, with washes and powders and airbrush weathering as well. I just love this F unit, and it's really photographic as well.
Yeah, it's very photogenic. There's all the details all the way around here. I'm just going to swing this around a little bit. You can see all the fading on here, the dust, the dirt, the grime. I mean, there's so much to look at. You could probably look at it 10 times and notice something different each time. I mean, even on the back, you know, the weathering, just dirtying it up, because all that dust is always getting kicked up. I know, like, one of my favorite areas to model is northern Wisconsin, and these things just get abused. They just get run, and sometimes they didn't get shut off for extended periods. They would just get beat. Lack of maintenance on the engines, just as bad as the track. and they might fix it when it broke down. But you could see some pictures of the Milwaukee shops towards the end, and they were just packed with locomotives, just torn apart for parts.
The deadlines, as they called them, just
Yep.
rows of locomotives that deferred maintenance really does a number on these locomotives. And this F unit, it's not completely beat to death, but it's getting there. It's up in its years, and this weathering job really reflects it, I think, as well.
One that could find a place in a museum.
don't inflate my ego too much here, Sean.
All right, so the last, we have a bicentennial SD40-2 that's Athearn ready to roll. Now, is this the... This has got to be the older blue box, right?
This is actually this is the standard.
The ready to roll.
So, you know, I've done a few different things to this. I've added the some MU cables. I did the fuel tank. Athearn adds detail parts you can add on. So I've added the piping on the fuel tanks, and I added the beacon and the E-bell, and then all the small details, and then the beacon as well, which actually operates. But you know, it's a good model. I'm still not entirely sold on the blue, but it's pretty much there. It'd be nice if I had the diamond plating on the walkways as well, but otherwise, this is a nice model. It runs pretty well as well, so not a terrible locomotive.
Now, I know I actually had one of these, and I sold it knowing that sometime, I had no idea who or when that they would be reproduced. I had no idea that Scale Chains would do them, but I'm glad that they did. I quickly went out and snagged one up. And people are arguing over the color of blue all the time. Well, I'm just happy that the model's out. I'm not going to complain about the color because no one else is doing it. So if you're going to complain about the color, either repaint it or make them yourself. I wish I had it here to compare for the walkways and some of the other details, and not to bash one or the other, but just to kind of show some of the comparisons and differences. But I mean, overall, it's just a cool engine. You know, it marked a special time for the railroads and for the United States and everything. And the details that Sean's added on here, you know, really help set the model off. The beacon, who doesn't love a beacon?
Gotta love all the flashing lights and everything.
Yep.
But I mean, it's a really nice model. Otherwise, I'd like to have a Scale Trains one, but I'm also happy with this Athearn one as well. And it really makes a homestay at the fleet. I don't recommend custom painting this. I really don't. My dad's tried it. It didn't go very well. Just imagine red paint streaming down some white. That's like a good preview of how bad painting one of these would be. But really, Athearn did a good job on it. I'm not going to knock it too much. For what it is, it's a good model.
Yeah, and you can see, especially if you own one of these, the paint is really crisp with all those lines and the intricate movements and stuff. You know, the paint on these models is very sharp. Even the ones that he's done, the lines are perfect. And it's something to be proud of when you do that kind of work.
Yeah. Like I said, masking is the number one thing you can do on one of these models. Masking is key, and airbrushes as well.
Yeah. So, now that we've reviewed his top 6, I'm going to pick my favorite, and then we're going to go to my top 6, and then he's got to judge mine.
I'm not going easy on you, Sean.
I wouldn't expect anything less. No, I'll be honest, I'm torn between the GP40 and the F unit, but I think I got to hand it to the 40. I love that era of locomotives, and the weathering on there is just flawless. I absolutely adore it. You know, and then again with the red inside the horn chimes and everything, really sets that model off for me. That's got to be my favorite.
Yeah, it's probably one of the reasons why I bring it to shows so much, and it's a really good model. Atlas really hit it out of the park with this, and considering that the weathering really ties it together as well, this is a fantastic model.
Yeah. So, without further ado, we're going to pack up real quick, and I'm going to set up mine.
Well, that was great.
So now what all right. So here's my top 6. Quite a mix here, as he said it himself. Some really different things. So all over the state of Wisconsin, the Southwest, and some real local stuff here. I don't think I have any two that are the same manufacturer either. Actually, yeah, the two Athearns down here at the end. So anywho, we're going to start with this guy here. This is one of my favorite models. it's the right paint scheme. It's not yellow and gray. It's not the orange and gray. It's not, it's black and orange. And it's got the stripes, or the safety stripes on the bottom, the X's. And I just, how do you not love that cab?
It's the classic steam engine style cab.
Yeah, I mean, it's dusty, but it's so cool. I mean, Walters did such a good job on this with the interior and everything. When I was up in Green Bay last, I got some really good interior shots, and not that there's a lot to paint, but I'd love to paint the interior on this and get an interior cab light in there, because that would just be amazing. But this engine in particular was very close to my dad, and they're very, very hard to come by unless you want to spend a lot of money or get something that's really beat up. To get like one in mint condition,
yeah,
I think it's super rare, and so I have a real hard time justifying doing anything to this besides the NCE decoder he put in there. So that's all I use it for. I painted the trip pins on the couplers just because I use trip pins on my layout.
Yeah.
A lot of people hate them, and
I, for one, don't like them.
but I mean, it's even for the older Proto 2000 stuff before Walters bought them. You've got the see-through screen here. And then there's so much weathering you can do on this. You have it's like a billboard, like just a billboard for weathering. And if Walters did another run of these, I guarantee you I would buy at least 2, and there would be graffiti on them. Because I think some graffiti on here, like in modern day, would be sick.
So, I really like this model, actually. So I still have to critique it here, Sean. You're not getting away that easily. It's a great model. I would love to own one of them myself. I'm sure I'd like to get one of the sound ones, actually. I'm sure they sound amazing, that typical Fairbanks Moore style. The safety stripes, it's such a key thing on these models. And I can't critique this in any poor way possible. This is an amazing model. And any modeler who owns this is going to have a great time. I mean, it's such it's a stellar model. 10 out of 10.
Thank you. So this is where I think we're going to butt heads a little bit. So, in all fairness, the 2 models that we have for Little Joes are at 2 different ends of the spectrum. There's no cheap Little Joe. You can kit bash them. I've seen people do it with F units to get the similar effect. But there is no such thing as a cheap Little Joe. I mean, this was $325 when it was, marked down at my hobby shop when I bought it brand new. And I remember Tom at Southside Trains. The day I went to get this, I was a teenager, and I drove my piece of junk truck all the way up to the south side of Milwaukee from Union Grove, and he was kind enough to open the door early once for me to go in and buy this thing so I could get it back for an operating session and open house at the club. It's got sound, it's got self-operating pantographs. So as you change direction with the model, the second one will go up, and then the other one will come down. Now, one thing I talked to MTH about was actually that they're operating the opposite of what they should for passenger, because passenger and freight actually operate their pantographs backwards, so are opposite of each other.
Yeah.
And, I mean, who really cares about that detail? I did at the time, but I'll probably never have overhead wire on my layout, and it's a pain to operate around. But on my friend Andy Breaker's layout, when we used to hang out and do more stuff, this actually ran around, I think it was like a 14-inch radius on overhead power on his layout. And he had a South Shore Little Joe, but I think it was brass. And it was so cool to see this go around because this thing can really articulate. I mean, just look at that movement. It's nuts. It really can do like any radius that you would have in a model train layout. But unlike his, it does not have the insane amount of detail up here. I mean, this is removable, so you can get to operate the pantograph power, the volume, the automatic pantographs and all that. Just doesn't have the level of detail, but it's got a painted cab interior on both ends. You can light up the number boards. I mean, it's got everything I need.
Yeah. So, obviously the detail is kind of sparse for this. For the detail it has, yeah, there's some detail. And I'm willing to question some of the details, actually. I don't think being able to move this locomotive like this, I don't think that's prototype accurate. But, this is a correct model in the terms of the fact that both cabs are unblanked. Unlike the freight version, they have a blanked out cab in the back. That's great. The operating couplers, you can actually operate the couplers on this as well. And the pantograph feature, that's really awesome. And Hats off to MTH for that. That's really great. Otherwise, things I don't like about this model, the plow is wrong for the first half. It's still got the Soviet-style buffers as well, I see here, Sean. I don't think you've ever noticed that.
Yeah, no, I noticed. I just never bothered to cut them off.
Otherwise, it's a for what you paid for it, it's pretty good. By the way, the Overland one, you're running about $1,000.
Yeah. That's 3 of these almost.
So, not a terrible model. It's my stamp of approval.
It's a good compromise, I think. Save yourself $675. Mind you, now I've seen used Joes with missing pantographs, broken mechanisms, without sound, go for parts for $500 a piece now. MTH in the past has expressed interest in rerunning the Little Joes and the bipolars, but it hasn't happened, so I'm not going to hold my breath. I have 1 freight and 1 passenger, which I'm happy with. I'll never need more than that, but it'd be nice to kind of see it happen again. I think the market would handle it.
Yeah, the market's definitely a need for some more Milwaukee Road electrics, honestly.
So, getting off topic of Milwaukee Road, we've got the Santa Fe here, ES44 AC. I believe it's an AC. This is actually a Tower 55 model. So back in the earlier 2000s, when I want to say like 2006-ish, when Overland actually did a shot at plastic, they made a bunch of Fallen Flags locomotives. So kind of like what Athens doing now, but they did this freight version. And before I went to college in 2008, I was a huge Santa Fe guy, believe it or not. It's kind of a switch to make from the Southwest to the Northwest. Well worth it. But this is by far one of my favorite engines. There's just a lot of emotional story that goes into this with my dad and I, and some of the things that were going on with the economy and everything at the time, and just some stuff I'd rather not get into. But it meant so much to me. I found this under the Christmas tree with a Broadway Limited 210-4 that were like my dream engines at the time. And my dad purchased these at Engine House Services in Green Bay, Wisconsin for me. Like at the time, you could not match this detail. There was nothing but brass that could match this detail. And I believe it's actually Athearn Genesis that ended up using this tooling for their engines. And there's just so much to see on here, and everything is perfect, except for the drive, which is where everything falls apart. The lighting is awful, the drive is terrible, everything comes apart on its own, but it looks great before it happens. I've had to take it apart multiple times to put the drive shaft back in the towers. I believe Northwest Shortlines actually come up with individual powered trucks to remedy that. But this is more of a shelf queen for me now. I thought about, ripping it out and trying to put this and transplant this onto a Genesis chassis. And I'm willing to pay to do it. It's just, can it be done without destroying this model? That is the absolute last thing I want, is for any harm to come to this. But you're free to take it away. I just think this is probably one of the sharpest models I own.
Yeah, so I love the yellow bonnet scheme. Fun fact, I've actually made a snoot nose out of a blue box before and painted it in the blue bonnet scheme. And this scheme really fits this locomotive really well, and the detail, it's there. I'm pretty sure this is probably one of the nicest fantasy ones I've ever seen for fantasy schemes wise. Few criticisms I have. It's kind of hard to get criticisms for this aside from the drive, but you can't probably see this very well on the camera, but there's divots in the paint on the Santa Fe. There's divots between the locker doors. That's probably my biggest thing. And I don't think the 724. I don't think that really adapted well to this. I don't think they would have made them that large. I know the Santa Fe a little bit. My dad rail fanned the Santa Fe before they merged into make BNSF, and he's got hundreds of slides, but. This is a really good model otherwise. If you say it's a shelf queen, I'm sure it's a shelf queen, and it really fits that role. It's a nice-looking model.
Yeah, and I totally agree with the numbers on there. I think a lot of the yellow bonnet stuff I've seen has always been a 4-digit, and there's usually a little less space.
Yeah.
So we're accustomed to seeing those smaller numbers, but I think at least the font is correct. But I think if those numbers were about 2/3 that size, it'd look much more appealing. But overall, still an awesome model. Scale trains. I would buy the crap out of this. If you made one of these, same. There's a market. Milwaukee Road in Santa Fe. So let's slide that guy out of the way here. Next, we're going to come up to this Kato RSC2. I believe this is even the road number of the one up in North Freedom at the train museum there. I have 2 of these. Funny story, and this is part of why I love this engine so much. My dad and I found these at Roma Lodge, which is a swap meet local to southeastern Wisconsin. And there's a person who was selling their father's estate. He had passed away. And she had these 2 engines marked at I think it was $75 a piece. And she said, the only thing is they don't run. I kind of looked at my dad and he looked at me like, why are you selling them for $75 a piece? She said, well, someone said they're collectible. Every model train I've ever seen is collectible to someone, but these weren't doing very well, and they had a lot of stuff. So we put them on the test track, and nothing happened. We throttled it up all the way, and nothing happened. And I said, I'm sorry. And this is towards the end of the day. It's been 4 or 5 hours. No one's bought them. No one's even hardly looked at them since they don't run. And my dad and I were just like, well, let's make him an offer and see what happens. So I said, how about $100 for the pair? And I'll take them with whatever damage might be done. She said that's fair. So I bought them both, took them home, and I think I had the Spectrum Dynamis system at the time, which is I don't think it's around anymore.
I don't think I've ever heard of it. It's kind of foreign. Yeah,
it's a really unique system. If you've ever run one, it's really cool. It's not the most powerful, and it's kind of, well, let's put it this way. There's a reason it's not popular. But I put it on the track, and it fired right up. They're both sound. They ran perfect.
You made away like a bandit, Sean.
You betcha. They were fully detailed. There's no damage to it other than maybe a little bit of a glue mark on here from place to place. But they're a sight above the Proto 1000 RSC2s, which I felt the trucks on those just weren't detailed enough.
Okay.
Mind you, there's not a whole lot of detail aside from just the side frame and springs. There's not a lot of hoses or anything on this either. No chains or anything to speak of. But it's a robust model. It's got, I think, a fair amount of hand-applied details. There wasn't a ton on here. A brass model would obviously look better. But the rivets, all the nuts and bolts around the headlights, the brake wheel and everything. It's a really cool engine. And then it's run long hood forward. I might do a video with this later, and it's starting up and everything, and it just barely chugging along, just fits it perfectly. I don't even know what sound it is, but I think it's got to be old.
Probably Tsunami or Soundtracks, I'd guess.
I think it's got to be older ESU, because you have to turn it on separately.
Oh, maybe then. Yeah. So I guess I'll start critiquing here. There's, like you said, there's minimal damage. There's one broken handrail, but that's pretty. You can overlook that. And there's a missing handrail as well, or a grab iron. But otherwise, I think you're missing some white handrails. But this model, it's a Kato model. I've got 2 of these at home as well. Not a big fan of the paint scheme to begin with, though. I really prefer just standard orange and black, but this is more detailed to the 1950s period, or 1950s and 60s, so it fits that period perfectly. Kato, great model. I don't have anything against this otherwise. Just get some white handrails and it should be perfect, I think.
So next, we're actually going to turn to a local railroad. Not that Milwaukee Road isn't local enough, but something that doesn't really leave the state other than going to Chicago, the Wisconsin and Southern. And now that I live in Waukesha, I get to see these every other day. But 4002 is a special place in my heart because this is the first Wisconsin Southern model I ever purchased. It was actually the first Wisconsin Southern engine I ever got up close to. I got some really good detail shots of it. I literally stood 10 feet away from the railroad tracks. I was talking to one of the guys working for the railroad, and he's just sitting there waving the engine by, and I'm just snapping pictures as it's just feet away from me. And I was just in awe because this is so cool. I've never rail fanned an engine that I've owned. And now that it's owned by Watco, some of the road numbers have changed over and whatnot, and they have infinitely larger amount of SD40-2s.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that one of the reasons I hold this near and dear to my heart. And this has actually had a few different sound systems in here. All of my SD40-2s from Athearn are sitting on the new Athearn sound chassis for the Ready to Roll series. So they're all brand new. They're all the same sound, same functions, everything. And the only difference is going to be the shells that are on them. So all my Athearn SD40-2s have been upgraded.
That's awesome. Yeah. I can't really say much bad about this. I think the only thing that really is I can get nitpicky about is I think your all-weather window is scooched a bit too far back. But, this model is fantastic. Big fan of the Wisconsin Southern myself. I used to live in Eagle, and the Wisconsin Southern went through there as well. And Athearn really has highlighted this as perfectly as you could get it. I mean, one of the great features about Athearn ready-to-run models is actually that the number boards are actually printed onto the back of a piece of acetate or like a glass piece, and they actually have that shiny effect of a number board as well. And this is a great model. It's got a really great place in your heart, and the Wisconsin Southern scheme is pretty sharp as well.
Yeah, it's too bad that they got away from the multi-stripes on the nose and they kind of went to that single stripe with Watco. But I'm glad that they at least kept the paint scheme and that they keep the tradition going with keeping that paint scheme on all the new engines that they purchase and refurbish.
Yeah, great locomotive.
Thank you. So, last but not least, I've got the runt of the group. Coming in a little bit smaller even than the RSC2, I've got this early ready-to-roll Athearn RS3. So this was, I believe, the first run that was actually DCC ready. This thing's had a pretty rough life. I don't know if you can see, but the hood on here, up by the cab, is actually melted in a little bit. Funny story about that, I was with a model railroad group, and we're, I think it was at Strawberry Fest, and there's a small train show up there, and I was with this group, and they've got a steep incline. It's a twice-round layout, and to get up the grade with all the train that I had, because God forbid that I take any cars off, I would throttle up at the bottom of the grade, and I would just run it as hard as I could, just notch 8 and sand all the way up the grade, and then back off. After a solid hour or two of that, it started kind of making some funny noises, and I was just like, I wonder what's going on. So I pull it into the yard, I'm looking at it, and there's a divot in my hood. Just this little melted spot of discolored paint. And I was just like, wow, that sucks. So this thing's probably got about 400 operating hours on it.
Wow, that's amazing.
I've actually gone through and counted, because there was a time where this is the only engine I ran at clubs and stuff. And so when I was running it, I would kind of keep track of the time. I mean, you figure 8 to 10 hours a day at a show, 2 or 3 days for a show. And over the years, it really adds up. Not to mention, this was my go-to switcher for many years. It's Athearn. It's basic. It's robust. And actually, one of my favorite features is one of its biggest problems. The lights. They're actual bulbs. They keep going out. But what's kind of cool is there's one, it's got to be a wire or something that if you hit a bump just right, it'll get brighter. Once in a while, it's just completely out. But every so often, it'll get dim, and then it'll get brighter all on its own.
No dimming functions here, guys. It's just wiring.
this is just a basic Digitrax DH123 decoder. The paint's coming off the handrails in spots. It's dusty. The grabs are bent in some places. But I mean, I don't think it's actually missing parts. It's just got a slightly melted hood from some abuse.
It's weathering.
It's on its second motor. It's on its third set of couplers, including the original McHenrys that came on here, and I think it's on its second set of gears. So this engine's actually been rebuilt. I had someone offer to put LEDs in for me from the club, because they're this thing's wasted. It's time to replace it. And I'm just I don't want to. I don't want to replace those lights, because it's actually one of the defining features for me.
Just wait until the bulbs burn out, because those incandescents.
I'm amazed they've last longer than anything else on
impressive.
here.
I've had a few models that I think I bought them and the bulbs were dead, and I was
already.
All right, LEDs right away. LEDs and fiber optics, but it's an Athearn model, like you said. It's robust, and parts are easy to come by for these. Actually, He already pretty much mentioned all the stuff I'd have to say about it. Handrails are a bit bent out, but that's pretty much it. And the melted spot, don't even think that's bad. That's just, hey, they dropped something on it while I was in the shop. It's just a dent in the
perfectly rounded dent.
But yeah, it's a great model. That's pretty much all I got to say about that.
So, we would like to, at this point, challenge one person to this challenge, Ken Patterson. We would like you to bring out your 6 favorite models and tell us why. So I hope you see this. I hope you actually get to check out my channel a little bit, see some of the amazing work this gentleman's done. And we'd like to see your 6 favorite engines. And while we're at it, I'd like each and every YouTuber, model railroader, anyone who's watching this, if you're into model trains at all, or anything, planes or cars, drop a link.
We want to see them.
Yeah, drop a link in the comments to your channel, to the episode, and I want to see your top 6 models. It can be freight cars, passenger cars, locomotives, cabooses, way freight, whatever. We want to see them. We want to see people get enthusiastic about this hobby and share why you're passionate about it. So show us your 6 favorite models, put a link down there, and let's all see each other's awesome stuff. Like, let's share this to the world. So until next time, take it easy.
Or Sean's. Sean and Sean out.
Bye.
That's great.
That was fun.